Delighted to be joined by CEO of Mac-Group, Paul McKenna. Paul, I'm delighted you're in a position to join us today. You're a busy man.
Yeah, not as busy as I'd like to be. As you're aware, Carol, we have 12 of our 14 sites closed in Dublin at the moment, which is unfortunate. But yeah, thank you very much for welcoming me on your show, and it's a pleasure to take part.
Oh, great. Well, thanks, Paul. So look, I'm conscious that in order to accommodate timings and everything, we're recording this on a Saturday morning. Not everybody would make themselves available on a Saturday morning, and I appreciate that. But I'm also mindful that you're actually sitting in your Dublin office on a Saturday morning. So describe to me what a Saturday morning looks like for you.
I would typically, before lockdown, it would have been up and out with the kids and maybe around the golf, or it would have been, time to, weekends for us as always as a family has always been about chilling and walking the dogs and taking a handy. And I live in Ballsbridge, so we'd go to Herbert Park for a walk or walk down along the canal, something like that. Lockdown now, it's about shuffling. It's about keeping all the balls in the air. I was up this morning at 9 for a call from a USA client out of New York who's got small babies. They got up at 6. So they wanted a call at 10, which lasted to 11 and ran on a bit after that. So, that's, I think at this stage, it's very difficult for business like ourselves, commercial constructors, to keep the positivity going, we're heading to our fourth month of lockdown here in Ireland. And it's very difficult. So I reach out to clients when they can, they reach out to me. I'm just back yesterday after being in the UK for the whole week. Where they never closed any sites and everything's working fine.
Yeah, look, and that's definitely something that we're going to get into today. It's been a consistent source of frustration over the last number of months. And, I think one of the things that we've really tried to do is be cognizant, even when we're speaking about this from an industry point of view and the continued lockdown, obviously we're abiding by the best public health available, but we're also trying to keep an eye on the human cost of this and the impact on children. Like, so for example, you mentioned there that normally your Saturday mornings you would be spent with the kids and the dogs. What ages are your children? Are they school going ages?
Yeah. Both the lads are in St. Michael's, great school, 10 and 15. Of course, the 15-year-old loved it because he didn't have to do his junior. We didn't, because we'd like to keep on top of him. The young lad, he didn't want to go back. He went back, I think this is his second full week, and he wanted to stay off. He thought homeschooling was great, but now he's back. He's obviously got back to his mates and he's enjoying it. And although they sent the school books home on Friday, which will be a bit of a worry, hopefully they will get back after Easter.
Yeah, it's been such a tough time for kids of all ages. And I think, there's been a lot of focus on particularly younger children, but whatever about for the 10-year-old, for the 15-year-old, there's a certain amount of socialization happens at that age as well that has been completely lost. I wonder about that aspect for teenagers. So, actually within your own family, how are the kids and indeed the whole family kind of keeping the social links alive?
It's very difficult. So I'm originally from South Armagh, and we'd been well used to attending football matches, Gaelic matches at weekends. We moved down to Dublin. My wife's from Dublin, and we have some lovely neighbours, and we've got a really active and vibrant social scene. I should say we had. I'd be a big frequenter of the local restaurants and bars in the Ballsbridge area. Good friends with people in the Chop House and the Old Hat, places like this. So we really assimilate ourselves into the area. So we made some great friends, and we really love city life. So from our point of view, from my wife's point of view, it's terrible because, she can't see her friends. She can't travel outside 5 clicks, which is understandable. And the whole social side is just dead. There's nothing happening. So we've got takeaway coffees and bits and pieces like that. But for the benefit of living in Dublin has been removed. We would have been far safer still living in Uri and on a big site, and having all the benefits of the countryside for the last year. So we're paying the cost of the lockdown, which everybody is paying when we fully understand. But it's had a real, I would say, a real detrimental effect on the family life, both from the wife's point of view and the kids. Because when you're at home the whole time, the wife has nothing to add to her value. When I come home for a conversation, what were you up to today in our rest? She's just been in the house the whole time, or she's walked the dogs, or she's just been out in a 5-click bubble, and we're not having any visitors to the house. So she hasn't seen her parents for over 12 months, and they live in town. So that's the grandkids of grandfather and grandmother of the two boys. And so that's very, very difficult. Zoom calls and, Teams and that sort of thing, and WhatsApp is fine, but it's not the same. They used to call in every Friday evening into our house, and we'd have a tea or something like that. So I think that social aspect has really been destroyed. I think it's, I'm a very positive, outgoing sort of guy. I think I'd worry about other people that for mental health that have bottled all this up, thinking that it's going to get better, it's going to get better, it's going to get better, and then it doesn't. And it just spirals. So it's the long term. It's the long COVID that I'd be worried about, the effects of the long COVID, that for people who didn't have COVID, but then when normality returns, do they have the ability to get back into that life that they had previously?
Yeah, I think, we talk a lot about the resiliency of people, particularly whether it's in an industry context or not. We talk about the resilience of people. We know it's an important thing, but just that resiliency has been tested so much. It's difficult to see how long that can be sustained for. And it's such a different way of living. You mentioned there that you're from South Armagh. Did you grow up in a rural or urban setting?
Both. So my father was an engineer, worked in British Leyland in the UK, in a place called Cowley in the West Midlands, beside Solihull. We lived in Coventry until I was 13. And then he was left the home place and we moved back to a rather remote place called Derrynoose outside Cady, County Armagh. At 13, I moved back in 1980 at the height of the hunger strikes into South Armagh. I went to a St. Patrick's High School in Cady with an English accent. So let's just say it was challenging. So you talk about adversity. I went through 3 years of very, very tough school between, from I got back in 80 to 83. And then left school, moved back to the UK, went to college there, and then started into my professional career.
Okay. It's difficult to kind of gloss over what it would have meant to return to a school. Again, I'm, of the same generation, but obviously living south of the border, we would have had a very different view of what happened. And I suppose one of our big experiences would have been, if we were doing a holiday in a caravan down by the coast in Wexford, we would know that certain times in July were to be avoided because they were absolutely giving us priority to families from Northern Ireland who came down and spent 2 weeks there. And it was just something that we accepted as part of life, that that there was this mass exodus out of Northern Ireland at certain times of the year. And it almost wasn't questioned. It was just the way things are. And look, I don't know if you've actually watched any of Dairy Girls, that show.
Don't miss it.
It's actually, I think it brought to life maybe a different perspective of some of the things that anybody throughout the 80s and 90s would have experienced, but not really understood. Well,
I suppose I was the English guy, the cousin, when I went back to the Northern Ireland, because I didn't understand it. Like, I was reared by Catholic parents in an Irish neighbourhood in Coventry. Didn't understand the Catholic Protestant divide in Northern Ireland. Arrived back into it, totally unsure of where we were. I started at school, and the only thing that really saved me, I suppose, in the first year or so was that the English school curriculum was maybe 6 months to 9 months ahead of the Northern Ireland curriculum. So a lot of stuff we were doing, I had done before. So I was like the bright kid. So I got up and was looked after, but put in the higher classes. But no, because I was, I played soccer, not Gaelic. I'd been underage, played for Coventry City, who was the first division team at that time in the UK. And when I came across, I'd never played Gaelic ever. And so when we were playing sports, I tended to play soccer, not Gaelic, when we were playing Gaelic. So that was even worse. That antagonized then the more Irish people in the school. Or should say more Republican people in the school, and but you adapt. So I suppose within a year or so, I picked up Gaelic and then was playing both sports, and both Gaelic and soccer for local clubs. I'm playing for the school, But then again, you're very remote, like, so where we lived, it was like 6 miles from the nearest shop, 7 miles from the nearest town. And when I lived in Coventry, I went out and got the 7A bus down to, the 50-meter swimming pool, outside your door, you'd leave.
A very different life.
Very.
Totally. Did you have siblings?
Yes, I've got an older brother. He stayed in Coventry because he was going through what would have been his O levels and A levels at that stage. And I have 2 younger sisters, and both of them, 3 of us would have came home, and we all went through and one sister remains at the home place, and the other sister got married and moved into another part of South Armagh. So they're still at home.
Oh, very good. Well, just, when you're living in a remote area, actually having siblings is probably one of the things that's necessary, and I mean, you must look at maybe the lives your boys are living now and compare it maybe to where you were at that age. Things have changed and it's just a very different type of life. But, I'm sure there's some aspects that you want to keep going. Like, did you keep your involvement in sport going through senior level?
Yeah, huge. So basically, when I moved personally to the UK, at weekends we would have played Gaelic for the Irish clubs in London. So I played with Kilburn Gaels, I played with Dulwich Gaels. These were teams in London. You'd move around depending on your work location or where you were staying as a single person with living in digs, basically. So so I kept that going up, and I suppose I didn't really become proficient at it properly into my late 20s, and that was merely because it was just seen as a pastime. It wasn't seen as the commitment you would have. You could be an average Gaelic footballer in London, but and you'd be a superstar. But when you come home and you played in your local parish, if you weren't fit, you didn't train twice a week. If you weren't into it, then you weren't considered. So there was a huge, I suppose, input then into fitness as the coaches got smarter and as the teams progressed. You can see the change in Gaelic football now. Like they are professionals. There's no word about it. Like I'm
professionals, but still operating in an amateur system and still expected to maintain full-time day jobs.
Yes. Well, we're not getting into the day jobs for the Dublin team, but I'm a proud sponsor. I'm a proud sponsor of Armagh GEA. So I'm one of the main sponsors on the senior team. Have been for the last 4 or 5 years. So I know Giza and a lot of the guys very well, the county board and all the rest. A couple of guys who, I suppose outside of Dublin, outside of some of the bigger, richer counties, I think that we still operate the old GA way. I try and find jobs for guys in Armagh. We've got Brendan Donny, who works for me. He's the centre back for Armagh, has done for the last 4 years as a quality manager. And I'm asked all the time, can we place people here, there and everywhere? Because, we're trying to give them work. Stop them going to Australia, stop them going to New York or wherever else to earn money and play Gaelic football. So,
Does that... it was a similar. I used to live in Kerry for a while, and it was a similar thing in Kerry. The Kerry team didn't need to worry too much about work, but the employers needed to adopt a flexible approach. And
big time.
Well, I suppose looking from the outside, Mac-Group doesn't seem like somewhere where you would get in and float by. I'd imagine it's a fairly intensive workload.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, we've always been flexible, I suppose is the best way to put it. So, Brendan puts the hours in to get away early to go to training. So he'd be in early. He'd be in at 7 to get away for 4:30, 5. And if he's on a project for us in Dublin, then he has to get down to Callan Bridge in Armagh. It could be a 2.5 hour journey. So he's on site at 6 sometimes. So but you give and you take, and he knows. And I think anybody who works in construction is going to take on board that there's going to be long hours. It's going to be tough. It's not for everybody. It's not for the faint-hearted. You really do need commitment. And I think that people who go into our game understand that.
Yeah. How did you come to end up in construction? Coming from going through secondary school, was it an inclination towards engineering? How did you come to find yourself in construction?
It's a funny story, really. When I was at school, I wasn't very, we did a bit of woodwork and stuff like that. But because you live in the country, you get the opportunity to earn money from you're probably 14, 15. Yeah, that young lad here, give him a handout, that sort of stuff. So if you're not in the farming side, and we had a small farm, but I was more interested in cars, a big passion for cars I've always had. And like when I was 14, I started working in a garage panel beating. So the guys who fix damaged cars. from, Saturdays, Sundays, and the long evenings then after school, and then all through the summer. And I thought that was I'm going to go into, that the sort of, not so much mechanicing, more car repair business. I thought that's what I would do. And, I went right through, and the guy that I was working with lived up the road. He got sick, so it stopped. And I suppose as I was getting old, I was getting, the romance got out of car panel beating, is what it was called then. And I got an opportunity to do some work on a building through a friend in town who said to come along and help out. And it was a summer job helping out carpenters. So, and I was 14 and a half. Like my lad, Harry's 15, and he wouldn't know a hammer from a screwdriver, like at this age, but like I was out in sight at that stage. And, and people were building houses on the country. So you were helping out. It's a simple thing. You're putting in window boards, or you're carrying slates up to the guys who were slating the roof. You were just helping out. And then you just learned, and you picked things up very, very quickly. And by the time I was leaving school, 16 and a half, I was as good as any first year joiner. And I remember going up, my brother was working in London at the time, and I went across for holidays. And he said to me, "Should come in and do a shift on a Saturday?" And I was going like, no interest, like, I'm over here for a bit. He says, "No, come in." And I went in, and I remember the time the guys were getting paid, I think, £45 a shift, as they talk about a shift. It was from 8 to 1:30. And the carpenters were rubbish, basically. They were absolutely crap. And they had no passion for what they were doing. They were just turning up to go through the motions. And I was helping out, and I did as much work probably in 2 hours, and they did a whole day. And the foreman come over to me and he says, "Would you have any interest in coming?" I says, "No, I'm back in Ireland. I'm trying to get through college. I've got a chance to go to college. I want to do something in construction, but on the management side." And really, that was the start of it. And I got an opportunity then when I actually moved then to the UK, and got I got an opportunity to go to college through Bovis, who then had a system for working where you could work 3 days on site and 2 days in college. And that suited me, because I don't think I could have went back to school, because, like I was saying, I didn't have a great time when I was in Katie for them 3 years. It was so I was a bit, I wouldn't say I was a bit scarred, but it was difficult. So I did it the other way, and then got through that. And then I would have did a lot of after schooling, and I would have did a lot of post qualifications, moving forward from my own qualification to get where I am today. So that really what it was, and that got me into construction management. And then I specialized in construction management and planning. So that was project planning on projects. Bovis took me on full time in London, and then they had the BOVIS was the 5 divisions, and S was special works. So we ended up working the Adelphi Theatre, and really that's how I got into interiors. So we refurbished the Adelphi Theatre, a very famous theatre in London. And we went on then to do numbers of high quality commercial fit outs. So it was probably something new back 25 years ago, 26 years ago. Actually longer than that. Remember, I'm getting old. It's about 20, maybe 30 years ago. So and I stayed in that vein the whole time. So I moved around a number of different companies in the UK, as you do, worked with all the big guys. But construction management fit out was all new. It wasn't building. You were managing a very precise process inside of high value buildings for clients who wanted a certain type of fit out and were willing to pay for it, basically.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear how people get started, because, in a lot of ways, the opportunities you get early on, whether it's, in your first or second or third role, if you're pushed down the direction of, whether it's specialist contracting, whatever it is, it tends to shape either you absolutely don't want to do that and you move in kind of an opposite direction, or you embrace that and you use the skills. So in your case, how long did you stay in that particular position?
Well, I would have, I suppose the early days were, I would have been working on when I was like 15, 16 and summer holidays between 16 and 17. I would have worked on construction sites in Ireland as a carpenter, hard graft, £8 a day, £40 a week. You weren't your keep. And I was saying, like, my father always says, like, if you work with your hands, you'll only have 1 week's wages, and it's your hands. And if you get sick, you won't get covered. He says, get yourself into management, get into something else. He says, where you can, he knew I had the smarts, as he would talk about it. And he'd say, like, use that, he says, and you've got the drive, you want to get on. I think you should go to England and see how you get on. But I left him at home as a man in his late 50s with just the two girls, as because my other brother was already in England. So he left him without sons at home as well, which would be difficult, as a farmer to say that. But it's what I did. And and then obviously I moved to London full time. And then I would have went round. So I probably went site manager, senior site manager, construction manager, project manager. And then due to personal issues, then when it was in 93, we moved back to Ireland. And then I had opportunity. Then I headed up Structure Tone in Dublin for 95 to 2001, and 9/11 hit, and let's just say there was a few unanswered questions. Some of us weren't looked after the way it was meant to happen, and because it was the massive United States multinational, everybody was treated the same, so there was no bonuses paid that year. But in Ireland, my staff, and we had about 70 at the time, couldn't understand this, couldn't fathom why Ireland was getting picked on. But it wasn't. This company was a global company, had about 3,000 employees, doing about 1.5 billion pounds worth of work globally, huge company, and a lot of their work was in the States. So they decided not to pay the bonuses that year, and a lot of these guys who came to Structure Tone, I had employed myself. I'd taken them on as the leader here in Ireland, and then a lot of them started to leave. So I turned around and I says, we have to do something about that, and that's when I left. So I says, we have to do something else. So I left, and I didn't know what to do. It was early 2002. And lots of people, because I had been the face of Structure Tone, came to me and says, why don't you do something yourself? So I says, right, maybe I will. And,
had that always been the ambition, Paul? Like, did you see yourself going out on your own at any time?
Not initially, because when you get to a very senior position in a large multinational, you get very comfortable. So you've got a big salary, you've got a good pension, you've got all the trimmings that come with that. It's a huge undertaking then to turn that and park it and then say, I'm going to do this for myself, and it takes considerable bravery and stupidity in the same way. You need to be able to balance the two of them, because this is high risk, low reward industry. The margins we work on are very, very tight.
But I'm conscious as well, kind of 2001, 2002, the marketplace in Ireland was very different for construction. That must have played some part in the decision making.
Yeah, but when you were in a specialist industry like we were in at the time, then the other thing too was that with Structure Tone, they have a huge amount of American clients. So the multinationals were coming to Dublin at the time, so we had plenty of work. It was the first data center sort of boom at the time. So there was lots of data centers, and we were involved in that. So my worry was that when I did step away, I didn't have that link. I didn't have the connections. So how would I get the work? And, I think just came out of it was that I was up at home, and I got a phone call out of the blue from a guy that I built a job for Structure Tone in Belfast. And as soon as he rang, Jim Sullivan from Allstate, he rang me. He says, Paul, he says, I've got another project in Belfast. I says, hold on, Jim, before you go any further, before you take another step further, he says, I don't work with Structure Tone anymore. And he goes, if I want to speak to Structure Tone, he says, I rang them. I'm ringing you. And that was the sort of first connection. And it went from there. I had to very quickly mobilize. So, overnight, basically, sort of meet him down in Belfast, go through what the project was. It was a couple of £100,000, which is minor in the great scheme of things now. But back then, it was a huge amount of money, because I hadn't done anything on my own. So,
but I presume at that point, did you even have any semblance of a team built around you?
No, nothing. I was Uno number one myself with nobody, and basically went down and met him to see was it something that we could do, and he bought into it, and he says, this is the job. So great. So the first thing I did was go back to Ronan McGovern, who's my commercial director, who's been with me now for 20 years next year, who's from Burren, and I had taken him to Structure Tone, and he was still there, but he was in Spain. And I rang him, and I said, look, Ronan, I says, I have an opportunity to go out on my own. I need you to come if you're interested. And he goes, 3 things: an office in Newry, put a full week's wages in, a full year's wages in the bank, and I don't have to go to Dublin, because he was playing for Down as a left half back at the time, and he wanted to be in Newry or in Down. He didn't want to travel, so he flew over, and me and him built the business since then to now. And I'm very proud of what we've done. I'm very proud of him for staying with me and taking the chance, I suppose, at the time.
I think that's so interesting, because when we talk about at the moment, staff retention across the construction industry is so difficult that an awful lot of this is coming down to money. How can we throw a lot of money at the problem? And, when you actually speak to people, money is only one part of a multifaceted reasoning why they want to be in a place. And, whether it's proximity to, for their family or for sporting associations or for whatever reason, understanding that and being able to actually have has that shaped how you grew your team? Like, did it give you more of an ability to understand how to give the team members what they need and want?
Yeah, I think initially when it was, we would have always been seen as a northern company, because they knew I was, obviously lived in Newry. Ronan was from Newry. Outside Newry, Brendan Moley came on board as our head of interiors. He's from Newry. And we would have had a lot of northern guys. And it's funny, when I meet architects and all the rest, they were saying that one of our success was that we were belligerent. We had to get it done. And I think it probably comes from our psyche and our makeup for what we've gone through as young people in Northern Ireland, is that we'll not be beaten. We believe we can deliver. We're as good as you. And you know what? We will do this. And I think that happened in Fit Out. You need that, because, you're condensing a huge amount of work into a very short period of time. So you can't, you just don't look for excuses. And I think that's one of the reasons of our success is that, apart from the, building a family enthused business, as in that we all look out for each other and really, really do. And we go the extra mile, not just in the talks and talking about it, but like some of the things we brought into the business have gone down really, really well. Like small things that we thought as we grew the business. So like we send out birthday cards to the spouses and the children of all our employees. So they get a birthday card, and it comes from their dad's work or their mother's work, and they don't understand what this is. It's got a voucher to go to the local toy shop. And it's a huge thing. It costs us whatever thousands a year to do it. Yeah. But it's one of the biggest things I've got, said to me when we do an annual family barbecue up in my house up in Newry. And there'd be 250, 300 people there with their kids and the rest. And they come in and they have a great day. And, and because we've obviously grown a business in the UK, they come across and they're saying, there's nothing like this. Why do you do this? Why do you take all these people to your house? We don't bring in hired staff. Me and the missus are running around juggling, trying to keep everybody going, and our own kids and the rest. I said, because we care. I want to give back. I really understand how much, staff do for us, but we want to give back as well. And we want them to feel that they're part of something bigger. And I think that's, you have to give the standard things that used to be the sales things, like the healthcare and the cars and the booper and the pension contribution. All that's your standard now. That's your standard. Everybody gets that. So now you have to give a little bit more. And giving a little bit more for us was, is creating a better workplace for them to work from. So we've got really stunning offices in Dublin and in Newry and in Birmingham now. A long way from where we started, me and Ronan, above a Chinese in Newry. So, it's, and we hark back to that when some of our guys come in and say, Sugar Island was our address. And why is it called Sugar Island? And when you're not from Newry, you won't understand that. But when you are, you understand. But we used to come in the Monday morning, you nearly get sick because the smell of the Indian and the Chinese from weekends that was permeated from downstairs up. And that was our office. And now you see what we do now. It's just mad like. But now going back to the staff, I think it's a huge thing. Retention's a huge thing. Hence the problems that we talked about earlier. But I think it's been genuine and been communicating. I communicate to my staff, not as much. We used to have town halls every 3 months where we got everybody together, and either us as directors would travel to the UK in our Birmingham office, and you'd have 100 people there, or we'd do it in Rockfield, or we'd hire a room in an area. And like our Christmas parties are sort of legendary. We brought everybody together for 2 or 3 days, and that's when everybody met each other, because they've spoken to each other now, and they've different specialities within the business in different locations. But when you get them face to face, then you understand why people are the way they are, because you don't know. You just hear them on the end of the phone or on a Skype call, as it was now. But obviously, Zoom and Teams in the last 12 months has pushed it further, but it's still not the same. It's still not communication for me. It's face to face has always been us, you know.
I completely understand that. And, you know, it's lovely to hear you talk about that because, you know, team satisfaction is such an important thing. Everybody understands the value, you know, commercially and the human value of that. And there's so many tools and techniques to do that. But the human connection, being very genuine, being accessible, making sure that your people are happy and making sure that your people are connected, not just to the company, but to the other individuals within the company. It's such a powerful thing, you know, but it's funny to hear you talk about the origins and the first business or the first office over the takeaway, because you're talking about it as if it's a very, very long time ago. This is not a very long time ago. That's been pretty massive progress over less than 2 decades. So what size is the team now?
We're 186. We're down from about 210 at the peak last year. And of course, that's down to a number of factors. It's down to, of course, COVID has hit us really, really hard in both sectors. And it's down to really trying to future-proof the business, that we don't know where we're going. We have no roadmap. And, you know, we're tied up here for four months in Ireland, carrying staff. Okay, whilst we're working still in the UK, you know, we had a 5-year plan. We've had several 5-year plans. So we had a 20-25-year plan, which, you know, by this stage we should have been with 230, 200, 240 people doing 275, 300 million. You know, so that was the sort of numbers that we were at, and we brought people on board, skilled people, to help us grow that, and then we had to pull that in. We had to pair the whole team back and say, well, you know, this isn't happening now, you know, because of COVID and because of, you know, the industry where we find ourselves in, the uncertainty. So, you know, like any team, you have to cut your cloth, and that's what we had to do.
You know, in terms of future planning, I can see how so much of that has gone to the wayside. But I'm conscious of the fact that, you know, you have offices in Newry, Dublin and Birmingham. And I'm conscious that those 3 different areas, or certainly between the difference between the UK and Ireland, is very stark in terms of what construction activities are ongoing at the moment. You know, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but, you know, given the fact that 12 out of your 14 Dublin or Greater Dublin area sites are closed at the moment, there would be a natural temptation to look towards the UK market for future growth. How you know, and that would be a natural reaction to where we are at the moment and the continuing uncertainty. But obviously, it's something that, you know, is that likely to focus growth across the UK and perhaps through the Birmingham office and take away perhaps from initiatives in Ireland?
Yeah, again, that's, you know, I think, Carol, if we'd be honest here, you know, you don't, you know, we're all in business to make money. And, you know, I'm not in business just to employ people for the sake of it. So, you know, our Irish staff are Irish centric. So the problem being is that we've built up a great team here. We've, you know, I would say we've nurtured them, and we've brought them to exactly what we want out of that team. And it's painstaking that, you know, for the last 3 months we've had to carry that cost wise without any. It's no good talking about government support, because unless you put them on the PUP or they earn under 76,000 a year, you don't get any support. So, you know, and you know, unfortunately, when you're at the high end of the construction market, living in Dublin, like, the majority of our people earn over that. And I think if you talk to anybody in construction, you know, that's what they're earning. So there's no government support we're talking about, and it's been very, very difficult. Growing it outside, yes, there is an opportunity, but we're Irish, and that's not been racist. I'm an Irish man as far as I'm concerned, and I want to have a successful business here in Ireland. And hence, that's why we've supported so well. And Newry is a support office. The Newry market, the Northern Ireland building market, is a serviceable market for us for international clients. We're not active in it every day. We don't tender a lot down there, because again, it's a very, very restricted market. More from the point that it's a very small. It's a very small and established building market, more than a specialist fit out market and a specialist contracting market that we would be very strong in. And yeah, you know, I think if we can turn around and get back to work here, well, then, we can safeguard the future of all the staff that we have. If we can't, then we're going to have to make some hard decisions, which is unfortunate, but we've carried them for as far as we can. We are, if the answer be there, we're probably at breaking point or very close to it. And I think there's a lot of other companies are going to be the same. Like we only have 2 live projects and 14 closed, out of 14 and 12 closed.
So, Paul, there was an interesting piece in the I think it was the Independent last week, and just about some of the pressure maybe that your clients are putting on the group, because maybe international clients don't understand the approach taken by the Irish government. Can you explain maybe what's happening there?
Yeah, so Ireland's been very, very successful in attracting FDI clients, both from America, UK, German funds, international funds, basically, a lot of Asian funds as well. So they have a timeline of an investment. So they come into a country and they say, right, we're investing for 2 years. This is the product. This is how it's all worked out, and this is what's left at the end of that process. To be the only country in Europe, and probably the only country in the world now, to be locked down in construction has a massive effect on their investment model for Dublin. So I think we have 3 large projects that have stopped. They stopped obviously in January. That should have been finished and handed over. That should be bringing these guys in an income at this stage. So you can understand that they're very, very worried. They wrote to us, and from a purely business point of view, these guys have invested hundreds of millions of pounds in a market they believed was stable, would give them a return, and that it was a worthwhile process. So now I would think they'll probably second guess it and say, in future, we need to be a bit more careful when we talk about, if we're going to invest in Dublin, if we're going to invest in the market, because look what happened there. Like, they closed their construction industry for 4 months. It's going to be 4 months, even if we get back in April, just on overnight. And while everybody else in the world continued to build buildings, they stopped. So that's a risk. And that becomes a risk factor when you're working out the points for an investment model. When the big finance houses are thinking of supporting companies to develop. So that's a real problem. And then there's a couple other ones, like we do a bit of work with a film studio. They're the same thing, closed. And it's having a detrimental effect on them, purely from, Hollywood films who want to come in to start a number of movies. Paul, it's crazy.
To me, as somebody who has benefited a lot from the work coming in through FDI clients coming into Ireland, one of the things I suppose that I wouldn't have thought that how we respond to COVID as a nation would be seen as possibly a political, not necessarily weakness, but a political instability. But do you think that that's likely to be seen as that, as in, Ireland is a politically stable nation? How we react to the pandemic on an ongoing basis, do you think that that's likely to be viewed as something that could be put in the same bracket or bucket as political instability? Because that would be detrimental. That would genuinely be a problem, particularly in a post-Brexit world.
I would think so. Definitely, I would think so. I think it's getting to that stage now. It's getting to where people are considering their investment options. So, like, do we invest in a development in Dublin, or do we invest in Birmingham, or do we invest in London? I think purely from we're talking about an industry-driven solution to a problem here, is that there's funds who want to come here, there's funds who want to spend money, but if they can't see a stable return, like you're saying there, is that why would they take the risk? And that's going to be detrimental to us. If it's a 5-year plan, that's different. If it's a 10-year plan, that's understandable, but not short-term money. And a lot of because of Dublin's size, has been reactionary. When our office boom went up, guys stepped in and very quickly developed buildings for 3, 4, 5 years. Okay, that's enough of that. Moved on, went to another city, started again. We're in the middle of a logistics boom at the moment. So people are building sheds right around the M50 flat out. We're part of that process. But that's But at the moment, we've got clients who want to invest, but they're saying, when we bought sites, when can you construct them? Because, working from home and COVID has created a massive logistics boom, but it's not going to last forever. And when we're locked down, you can't build the sheds. So it's catch-22.
Paul, are you confident that construction will reopen on April 5th?
No, I don't think it will. The sound bites coming out, and they're not talking they're talking basically in case numbers. They're not talking about how that affects the population. And, a healthy population, not just about people getting sick or not getting sick. A healthy population is about people having the rights to go to work, the rights to actually go out and enjoy their hard-earned money, the rights to be able to go and shop, the right to go and be able to spend time with their family in a proper location, in a proper setting. All them things have been taken away, and it's automatic. All we can do is lockdown. NEFIT can only lock down. They've come up with no other solution than lockdown. If you look at the numbers this morning, 72 in ICU, 325 numbers total infected in COVID in all the hospitals in Ireland. If we can't cope with that, then we have a bigger problem in this country. And the bigger problem is that HSE is not fit for purpose, and they're saying they can't cope with another spike. But 300 people in hospital, everybody dies from COVID, dies from nothing else. And the numbers are not any worse than they were pre-COVID. So there hasn't been a massive spike in deaths. Everybody's just died from COVID. Nobody's died from anything else. So them numbers scare people. The scaremongering is unbelievable at the moment, coming from government ministers, coming from RT, coming through most of the papers. It's not real. And that's to try and control a lockdown. You don't need a lockdown at this stage, because in construction we've proven 40% of our industry is working, and there's something like I think there's been 36 or 40, I think maybe it's 46 infections over the last 4-month period, 3 month heading into a 4-month period, which is minimal for what that brings to the industry.
The Construction Industry Federation has been really on top of this. They've rather than lobbying on other grounds, they've been very specific about relating back to the science, relating back to the numbers, showing that the numbers and the instances across construction sites have been below average of other sectors. We know that there was huge investment right across the board for all companies to be able to reopen sites, going back 9 and 10 months ago after the first lockdown, so we know that huge investment was there. We know that the HSE and CIF and the other property bodies for the built environment worked together to put these protocols in place. Companies invested and had rolled out these procedures. We know that they were working, and suddenly all of that doesn't seem to factor into the conversation. And that's despite the genuine good work that's come out. And it's not even about the lobby groups or their industry representative bodies. We've now had individual business leaders speaking out, and obviously we see through the High Court at the moment, Paddy McKillen Jr.'s company. Yeah. So that's a really interesting one, and we don't know how that's going to pan out. Is it likely to have an impact? But there seems to be a disconnect now, because certainly the current housing minister seemed to be pushing in the same direction as the industry and was looking for a reopening, but again, something isn't connecting. What needs to happen now? And I'm asking you because you're in the unique position that you're operating full-time businesses on either side in either jurisdiction in Ireland and the UK. You mentioned today that you're just back after spending the week in the Birmingham office. So obviously the UK was actually in a much worse position than Ireland was a couple of months ago. They've really stepped up in terms of the vaccine program. And I think you probably touched on there about maybe the HSE just not being fit for purpose. And maybe that's one of the stark comparisons. But, what should we be learning from the UK experience that we're not?
There's a number of pointers which we should take, and I suppose is if we look at the construction industry first off. So the construction industry works behind closed doors on regulated sites. You have to have a pass, or you have to be inducted to get onto the site first. So there's no comparison to anything else when you talk about going shopping or going getting a coffee or any of that carry on. It's totally different. You're turning up to go into a controlled environment. So you come into that controlled environment, and you either sign in or you swipe in. Maybe typically COVID, you're not allowed to do that anymore. So basically, then what we have done, and what the companies, as you rightly pointed out, we spent hundreds of thousands of pounds for each company to put in 3 times the normal amount of all that was required in canteens, in toilets, in wash hand basins, and all that, just so we could operate. So that was done last year. So and infections from COVID were minimal. Now, in the UK, we operate the exact same plan. It's no different. It's no better. It's no worse. It's to the exact same level. All construction industries in Ireland worked the SOPs. So, and that was agreed with the CAF, and we've operated to that. So the biggest problem has been that I can see, and is that the country's been run by a school teacher and a doctor, non-risk takers, automatically for all their lives have been employed by a major state, didn't take any risks. Like, Leo turned around and said at one of the meetings, sure, why are these people complaining? Why not just give their workers to the companies that are open? Like, please, like, that's a leader, that's the ex-leader of the country who doesn't understand how the business works. Never mind construction, but how business works. So that's just shocking, like when that came out. And that's what we're dealing with here, is people who don't understand how construction works. We're not the builders and contractors of 15 years ago. We're a very, very experienced professional organization now, because if we didn't, the FDIs would not be an island. Yeah. We export all our knowledge on data centers around the world. We're one of Europe's leading data center providers for Microsoft, for Google, for all that platform of people. That's Irish construction companies building in Holland, in Finland, in Denmark, all around the world. And yet they're saying that we can't operate here. But the other fallacy is that they opened 40% of the industry, which to suit themselves. So Intel can open, but yet I can't open MasterCard. It's crazy. It was just so self-centered.
That actually forms the basis of one of the arguments that Paddy McKillen Jr.'s lawyers have put forward. How is it safer to do one and not the other?
Well, there was talk there about, we might open housing. Like, this just shows how disconnected they are. If they did open housing would be a bigger risk than general construction, because it's multi-room. You have lots of people working closer together in a house than you would have, say, in an office building or a commercial setting. So, it was a thin edge of the wedge. Or we'll let them open housing, only because the public is crying for social houses. So they are very much, the government, unfortunately, are very much driven by public opinion and what's said in the papers. But if the commentators are coming out saying that we shouldn't open construction, but not giving any reasons why, then they're following that sort of line. And, like when you listen to some of the commentators, like, it's just shocking, some of the stuff, the unknowledgeable statements are coming out, that without asking open debate. We've asked through the CAF for a number of open debates with these policymakers, or with these the guys who are making these statements regular on TV, who are informing the public. We said, no, let's have a roundtable debate, and let's describe. We're quite happy to debate it. We know that our industry is safe. We know that we're the only construction industry in Europe that's closed, and and our expertise on our health and safety and the safety of our staff is paramount. We're exemplar in Europe, and that's why our data center business has been expanded and has been able to go around the world. So for to be told that we can open this little section of the industry but not this section, it's only been done to suit the government's lack of setting up a proper trace and testing system, setting up a proper vaccinating system, and the way they've solved the problem is close it all down, everybody stay at home, including construction, because they're scared of the movement of people. But that's down to their own failings. Like, they asked this 12 months ago for us to flatten the curve. They asked 12 months ago for us to look after frontline staff, look after people in the home cares, in homes, long-term homes, and frontline staff. We have done that. We have been at home for locked down for the best part of 12 months. My industry was decimated last month for 3 months, last year for 3 months. And now this year we haven't opened. So like, how much more can we do? And the difference between that and the UK is the UK were very much engaged with the construction industry because it's a huge part of their success to continue driving growth, to keep people employed, to pay taxes. Who is going to pay for the pub and all of these costs that we're incurring to keep healthy people at home for the last 3 months? Me and you, Carol, when the new USC charges come around and they're not 4% or 6% or 8%, they're 10%, like happened with the banking crash. They just nationalize their problems. And that's what they're going to do with this. And we're going to be found again.
Paul, how do you reconcile your position as a CEO of a company who's trying to keep clients, projects, staff together, while at the same time your role as a father in the same town sending 2 boys out to school every day?
Yeah, well, let's just call a spade a spade. Like we know that the school is spreading this. Let's not be silly. The kids are going to school and they may be asymptomatic, but they can bring it back. Like I had COVID. I got COVID at Christmas very badly. Ended up in the hospital in Uri for 7-8 days. So it's not a very nice thing to get.
I'm sorry to hear that. I hadn't realised.
Yeah. So I had a very bad touch of it. But of the 20 family members as a massive group, I got it the worst. My wife didn't really affect him. My eldest 15-year-old boy, he got it. No effects whatsoever. Didn't even know we had it. Got tested, so he was asymptomatic. My 9-year-old, he's 9, he was 10, he's 10 now. He didn't get it. So he's been tested. He goes to St. Michael. So the other fellow doesn't go back to school yet. He's not back to the 15th of April. So I have one going to school at the moment. Okay. From that point of view, definitely it's, I do believe that school's far more riskier than construction. You've got 25 kids in the class who are running around without masks, meeting up, whatever else. So yes, they can. And if they're asymptomatic, they're taking it back without knowing it into their family homes. But you know what? The government comes out and say that play dates are the risk. Not the 8 hours or 7-8 hours they spend in school today, the 30 minutes they played in the park together. So they are turning the argument every time to suit themselves. Lockdown, you all have to stay at home. We don't want the mobility issue in town. That's what's going to cause the problem. And they're not saying construction's unsafe. They're now saying it's a mobility issue. If they let all the builders back, it's a mobility issue and it's going to spread through mobility. So they're changing the avenues every time that we tried to steer them in a certain way. It was that we were a risk. Now we're not a risk. We proved the point we're not a risk. The HSE have looked at our numbers. We're not a risk, a very minimal risk at that. But yeah, going back to schools, whilst Liz was great to get the kids back to school, I have no doubt that's where the spreaders are coming from. But we have to understand that we have to live with it. We can't hide from it. And as long as our hospital numbers and as long as our ICU can cope with it, what is the issue? It's no worse. The people who get affected now are not reporting to hospital. Of the 500 people that have been getting every other day for the last 7 days, our hospital numbers have not increased. So that's my thought process is that it's no worse than a bad dose of flu for somebody who's 25 to 35 to 40, who's healthy, who can carry it. And he gets on with it. He isolates at home. He doesn't go to hospital. And that's it. It just carries on. The numbers are dropping in hospitals, and that's the key thing. And that's what we were asked to lock down for, was to protect the hospital numbers. Now, surely, a country of 5 million people can cope with 300 people in hospital. This is the real numbers that we have to start looking at, from this pandemic.
Yeah. No, it's an absolutely fair point, and you're voicing some of the frustration that we've heard come up every week on the show over the last few months, particularly since early January. Before I let you go, one of the things we always like to do is talk about the pipeline of work that a company has, to talk about the plans over the next 12 to 24 months and beyond. It almost feels like an irrelevant conversation now as we're heading into the Easter break. I'm really interested. What's the plan for Mac-Group after Easter?
Well, that all I suppose after in Ireland, that depends on the decisions made around the 5th or 6th of April. We're sitting here on the 27th today, and we haven't been notified yet, so we don't know. And what people must understand as well, that when that notification does come, even if it is that we do get back on the 5th or 6th, the construction industry will not get back to the levels it was before for 4 to 6 weeks. This is not a tap you just turn on and there's water there. The construction industry takes time to re-gear. So we have to get our supplies from our suppliers sent in. We live on an island. Not everybody has the supplies that we need. There's a lead time for all these new supplies that we need now. A lot of our specialist staff have returned. Eastern Europeans, all the guys have gone home. And my Polish staff have gone home because they're not going to pay Dublin rents with no income, when they're not producing the money. So there's an awful lot of our subcontractor staff, specialist subcontractor staff have returned. We've had other guys who've gone to work in the UK and they won't come back and we've had a cladding contractor for a job of finishing on 35 Shelburne Road. It's a very specialist zinc contractor who turned around and says he will not return to Ireland until 4 weeks after the restart to make sure they don't close them down again. So he as a subcontractor company, he will not come back for 4 full weeks until he knows that on the 5th of April we open, by the 5th of May we haven't been closed, because his restart costs are so much that it's not worth coming over for 1 week or 2 weeks and then the whole thing closes down again. That's going to be multiplied across our industry when we do get an opportunity to go back. And that's the real worry here, is that if they keep pushing this, which 5th of April could become the 18th or the 23rd or the 25th of April, you're not actually creating real product for another 4 to 6 weeks after that. So you're in the middle of the year, half your year's gone.
And that 4 to 6 weeks, is that realistic, or do you think that even that's optimistic to get the supply chains back, knowing that there's staff that haven't returned?
Yeah, that's totally optimistic. We've never had this before. Everybody knows you've only 11 months of the year in construction, really. You lose 2 months, sorry, not 11 months. You only have, you lose 4 weeks over the Christmas period. You lose the 2 weeks coming up to Christmas, where people finish around the 15th, 16th, or the 20th, whatever it is. So then up at the end of December is finished. But the next 2 weeks into January are just dead. People say they come back on the 4th, the 6th, the 10th. They come back in dribs and drabs. You don't get up to full speed until the end of January. So that's a 6 weeks window. You normally, when we program, we know we're not going to be at peak performance. Now we have sites that have been they've been desolated for 3 months. So you have to go back and survey the site to see if there's any damage. You have to survey the products that you have on site have been weathered okay. And then you're ringing around all your subcontractors and find out, are they returned to work? Do they have the staff to return to work? Now, everybody's saying we want to get back to work, but the problem being is that because there's no roadmap, there's nobody telling me now, an employer in the construction industry of nearly 200 people, that my people can go to work in 7 days' time. That's shocking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like 7 days' time. Never mind the subcontractors.
Yeah. Look, obviously it would be great if we even had some clarity about that.
Yeah.
And it looked like we were moving towards clarity right up until the announcements yesterday evening. So I'm just aware that it's definitely too early to call it. I appreciate you being so forthcoming and so generous with your time today, but so forthcoming as well. I think that it really is time now that the industry needs to speak up for itself. I think the representative groups have been doing all that they can do, but it's really important actually to share the experiences and the feedback that contractors are getting from their clients to really make sure that the decision-making process factors those in, that we are actually, we want what's best for the public health. We want to be taking consideration of the science and the data, but it needs to be reconciled with what's happening on the ground and the needs for the industry as well. The housing crisis isn't going away. And I know that you mentioned that, the prioritizing of social housing, but there's a chronic shortage of private housing as well, or housing for the private market, and that's only getting worse. So, and in fact, I don't know if you saw it, but only in recent days, David McWilliams have asked for prospective buyers to basically go on strike and not buy over the next year because the market is so dysfunctional. And I understand where he's coming from, but it feels like really the wrong solution to the wrong problem. You know. So
it is.
Look, we leave it there for the moment. And look, I'd love to touch base with you again in a couple of months, hopefully when the Dublin sites are back up and running, and then we can really take a look at, you know, the pipeline of activity for Mac-Group into kind of 2022 and beyond. But for today, we'll leave it there. That was CEO of Mac-Group, Paul McKenna. That's it from us today. Thank you for listening into Property Matters on Dublin South FM. You can get in touch with the show on social media at iPropertyRadio, or indeed by emailing hello@iPropertyRadio.com. My thanks to Peter Rice on sound. We're back at the same time next week. From myself, Carol Tallon, and all the team here, stay safe.